It has been 15 years since the events of the King of Iron Fist Tournament 2, where Kazuya Mishima, the leader of his family's conglomerate the Mishima Zaibatsu, was defeated by his father Heihachi Mishima, who proceeded to retake control of the company after previously losing it to Kazuya in the first tournament. Having managed to overcome Devil Kazuya, a demonic version of his son that was brought on by his inherited devil gene, Heihachi decided to end his cursed bloodline and dropped Kazuya into an active volcano, killing him. After regaining control of the Mishima Zaibatsu, Heihachi establishes a paramilitary organization dubbed the Tekken Force that serves to protect Heihachi and the company from any who dare to attempt to take it from him again. Heihachi's use of the Tekken Force, as well as his company's influence in settling world affairs, leads to a period of world peace, with the totalitarian rule of Kazuya soon becoming a distant memory. Despite this peace, however, Heihachi still finds himself with an insatiable hunger for power. Shortly after reclaiming the Zaibatsu from Kazuya, Heihachi begins hearing about the legend of an ancient fighting god, known as Ogre, who is rumoured to be sleeping somewhere in the ruins of South America. Heihachi uses the Tekken Force to search for anything that might lead to Ogre's location, and soon hears word from a Tekken Force squadron that has found traces of the fighting god in Mexico. Upon arriving in Mexico, Heihachi finds that the Tekken Force squadron has been obliterated by Ogre. After catching a brief glimpse of Ogre before it flees, Heihachi becomes determined to kill it and absorb its power for himself. Meanwhile, in the mountains of Yakushima, Jin Kazama lives a quiet and sheltered life with her 15-year-old son Jin. Jin is the son of Kazuya Mishima and was conceived after his parents met during the events of the King of Iron Fist Tournament 2. Jin, who is unaware of his relation to the Mishima clan, has lived a peaceful childhood with his mother, who has protected the existence of her son from the world, in fear of both Kazuya's enemies and any forces linked to the devil gene discovering him. Jun, however, knows that Jin will one day have to care for himself and teaches him the Kazama fighting style as a means of basic self-defense. Sometime later, Jun begins to feel the approach of a great evil near their home. In order to prepare her son for the worst, Jun tells Jin that he must seek out his grandfather Heihachi Mishima should anything happen to her. Jun's premonitions are soon proved correct when Ogre itself appears at their home to face Jun in combat. While Jun and Ogre fight, Jin tries to rush to his mother's side but is knocked unconscious. Upon awaking sometime later, Jin finds himself alone with no trace of Ogre or his mother left. Assuming that his mother had died defending him, a vengeful Jin vows to destroy Ogre. With nowhere left to go, Jin follows his mother's wishes and travels to the mainland to meet his grandfather Heihachi. Heihachi is shocked by the existence of Jin and his story of Jun's apparent death at the hands of Ogre, with him theorizing that Ogre has been traveling across the world in search of strong souls ever since the Tekken Force awakened him in Mexico. Heihachi takes Jin under his care and begins training his grandson in the Mishima fighting style, forcing Jin to abandon the defensive style of the Kazamas. Jin follows the brutal training regimen with no complaints, his only desire being to gain enough power to kill Ogre for its perceived killing of Jun. While training his grandson, Heihachi begins to suspect that Jin may share Kazuya's devil gene due to a brand on his left arm that Jin claims he suddenly received after Jun's death. Heihachi is concerned by Jin's story and begins to keep an eye on him in fear that the devil gene has passed on to his grandson. Soon after he begins training him, Heihachi enrolls Jin in the Mishima Polytechnical School, a high school founded and funded by the Zaibatsu and named after Heihachi himself. Upon starting school, Jin meets a girl by the name of Ling Xiaoyu, who is a ward of the Mishima Zaibatsu and the keen fighter herself. After running away from her parents while on vacation, Xiaoyu stowed herself on board one of Heihachi's ships and beat up his bodyguards with the goal of asking him to build her a theme park. Impressed by her fighting ability and audacity in asking him for a theme park, Heihachi enrolled Xiaoyu in his Zaibatsu school and gave her a trained panda as a pet and bodyguard. Upon meeting Jin, Xiaoyu becomes infatuated with him, though Jin doesn't openly reciprocate her feelings, much to Xiaoyu's annoyance. Despite his academic and training responsibilities, Jin also finds the time to engage in multiple street fights where he often comes out as the victor. However, Jin is eventually faced by a taekwondo practitioner by the name of Huarang. The leader of a street gang that often commits fraud through street fights, Huarang also doubles as the student of Baekdu-san, a well-known taekwondo master who Huarang respects greatly. Huarang and Jin engage each other in battle, but amazingly, their fight ends in a draw, a first for both fighters. Both Jin and Huarang are livid at their failure to beat the other and vow to defeat each other the next time they meet. As a result of this, a rivalry begins to form between the two, with both fighters desperate to gain a victory over the other. 4 years later, Heihachi concludes Jin's training, feeling that he is now ready to face Ogre and gain revenge for Jun's death. In order to lure Ogre out into the open, Heihachi announces the King of Iron Fist Tournament 3, the first competition hosted by the Zaibatsu in 19 years, as a means of gathering enough strong souls together. The announcement of a new tournament sends shockwaves across the world as 18 fighters gather to compete, with some long-time fighters once again heeding the call of another tournament. After losing his spot in the finals to the King of Iron Fist Tournament 2 due to a traffic jam, Paul Phoenix immediately jumps at the chance to enter another tournament after receiving a personal invitation to compete. Despite now being 46 years old, Paul still holds himself in peak physical fitness and is determined that this time he will win a tournament and mark himself as one of the all-time greats. Paul tries to get his best friend Martial Law to enter the tournament with him once again, but Martial refuses, having become a successful businessman after opening his own chain of Chinese restaurants while still running his dojo. Soon after the announcement of the King of Iron Fist Tournament 3, Martial leaves to go on a business trip but feels uneasy after hearing stories about the disappearances of many fighters across the last few years. Concerned for his son Forrest, who is also a talented martial artist himself, Martial forbids his son from entering in any tournaments outside the dojo and leaves for his trip. Forrest at first obeys his father, but after being visited by Paul, is convinced to enter the tournament behind Martial's back. Paul and Forrest soon make their way to the competition, hoping that they'll return victorious before Martial finds out. After saving the life of Dr. Boskonovich in the previous tournament, the Manji clan leader Yoshimitsu has spent the last 19 years helping out his friend. Yoshimitsu has been raising the funds needed to help Boskonovich finish his research on the cold sleep machine, a device intended to give someone immortality that was built by Boskonovich after he lost his daughter. One day, Yoshimitsu is shocked to discover that Boskonovich is suffering from a mysterious pathological organism that he believes he has gained from his experiments on the cold sleep machine. Boskonovich tells Yoshimitsu that in order to get rid of the organism and save his life, he will need the blood of the fabled fighting god Ogre. Deducing that the upcoming King of Iron Fist Tournament 3 will be the perfect place to defeat Ogre, Yoshimitsu enters the competition in order to kill Ogre and save his old friend. As a result of Boskonovich's experiments with the cold sleep machine done during his time spent kidnapped by Kazuya, assassin Nina Williams and her sister Anna Williams spent 15 years in cryosleep after Anna defeated Nina in the previous tournament and had her captured by Kazuya's forces. However, the Tekken forces' unearthing of Ogre led to Nina releasing herself from cryosleep early. Due to her sudden awakening, Nina is left with severe amnesia and has no memory of her sister Anna or the events of their long-standing rivalry. Instead left with a strong desire to assassinate Jin Kazama, Nina flees from the Mishima Zaibatsu and spends the next 4 years in hiding before entering the tournament. Anna meanwhile awakens not long after Nina but is left with no adverse side effects. Upon hearing of Nina's memory loss and near-robotic desire to kill Jin Kazama, Anna is saddened due to her desire of continuing their sibling rivalry being no longer possible. Instead wanting to protect Nina from once again falling into the life of an assassin, Anna follows her sister into the tournament. 19 years after he faced Bruce Irvin in the King of Iron Fist Tournament 2, Hong Kong super cop Lei Wulong still believes that Bruce faked his death, but with no official sightings of Bruce being reported since their last clash, he is forced to let it go. Despite now being 45 years old, Lei's fellow officers refuse to believe his true age due to his strength and agility, which Lei still retains due to his vigorous training. While investigating the rise in missing fighters, Lei is one day visited by none other than Heihachi Mishima himself, who asks Lei to participate in the King of Iron Fist Tournament 3. Lei is confused as to why Heihachi would invite him personally, but Lei's intrigue wins over his doubt and he agrees to enter, hoping to add another solved case to his already stellar record. Given the considerable gap in time since the last tournament, a large number of the tournament's competitors debut for the first time, with some even carrying on the legacy of previous competitors. Sometime after the events of the King of Iron Fist Tournament 2, Michelle Chang discovers an abandoned baby in the ruins of a nearby Native American settlement. Michelle decides to adopt the baby and names her Julia, before taking her home and raising the girl in a loving environment with Michelle and her Native American clan. Upon her reaching a certain age, Michelle teaches Julia how to fight in order to defend herself and her homeland from any who would attempt to harm it. After a while, stories begin to reach Michelle and the others about fighters disappearing all around the world. Fearing that their clan's legend of a fighting god were indeed true, Michelle recovers the pendant she had discarded nearly 20 years ago and brings it to Heihachi Mishima in Japan, in the hope that he would reveal why he had originally had her father seek it many years ago. Instead of helping her, however, Heihachi kidnaps Michelle and takes her pendant for himself, with the goal of using it to fully awaken Ogre. After she fails to return home, Julia-chan grows concerned for her mother's safety. Upon the announcement of the King of Iron Fist Tournament 3, Julia deduces Heihachi's plot and enters the competition in order to face him and rescue Michelle. 15 years after he had attempted to save his orphanage from bankruptcy, the masked luchador King was attacked by Ogre, ultimately losing his life to the fighting god. King's death left his friend and former rival Armor King in a state of deep depression, leading to him abandoning the wrestling profession altogether. After burying his friend, Armor King hears word of a new wrestler entering the wrestling scene who dons a jaguar mask similar to King's. At first livid at the idea of someone disrespecting his friend's legacy, Armor King is shocked to discover that the man donning King's mask is actually an orphan who was cared for in King's orphanage as a child. Having took up his idol's mantle in order to help fund the orphanage he had grew up in, the new King is untrained in wrestling and has been losing every match he has taken part in. Feeling obligated to help out one of his friend's orphans, Armor King takes the new King under his wing and tells him the truth surrounding King's death. Determined to gain revenge for the murder of their friend and idol, Armor King and King Jr. train intensely for 4 years, until Armor King feels that the young man is ready to live up to his friend's legacy. After receiving his mentor's blessing, King Jr. enters the King of Iron Fist Tournament 3, in the hope that Ogre will reveal itself so it can face retribution at the hands of King Jr. 19 years after Jack 2 was destroyed by the mad scientist Dr. Abel, Jane, the young girl that Jack 2 had taken under its care, is still traumatized by the death of her friend. Jane, however, soon learns that the technology for Jack 2's AI came from the Mishima Zaibatsu, and that they are currently developing a successor to Jack 2, dubbed Gunjack. Gunjack, an upgraded version based on both Jack 2 and Prototype Jack, is entered into the King of Iron Fist Tournament 3 by Heihachi, who wishes to test its capabilities in newly added pivot gun. Jane, however, plans to use the tournament to sneak into the Zaibatsu and install the original Jack 2's AI into Gunjack, in the hopes of bringing her old friend back to life. After the death of his beloved friend and bodyguard Kuma, Heihachi begins to train his son, who Heihachi dubs Kuma 2, to replace him. Faster and smarter than his father, Kuma 2 also inherits his rivalry with Paul Phoenix after seeing him on television one day and becoming incensed at his scarlet red karate gi. Kuma 2 enters the King of Iron Fist Tournament 3 for 2 reasons. The first is to find Paul Phoenix and destroy him in battle. The second is to meet Ling Xiaoyu's bodyguard Panda, who Kuma 2 is madly in love with. The son of a wealthy family in Brazil, Eddie Gordo's life was changed forever when he returned home from school one day to find his father assassinated. Eddie's father, who had been trying to take down several major drug rackets in Brazil at the time, warned his son in his dying breath to take responsibility for his murder, hoping that Eddie would be safe from his killers in prison. Eddie did what his father asked and spent the next 8 years in prison, vowing each and every day to make his father's killers pay in retribution for his death and for the 8 hellish years of his life spent in jail. While incarcerated, Eddie meets an old capoeira master who teaches Eddie the style, with Eddie training every day until he is skilled enough to be considered a master in his own right. Upon his release from jail, Eddie hears of the King of Iron Fist Tournament 3 and decides to enter, hoping that if he wins, he can get the Zaibatsu to help investigate his father's murder and uncover the truth about his death. A former US Army soldier, Brian Fury was an Interpol officer in Hong Kong that was known as a skilled detective, but dark rumours about corruption followed him for his whole career. While investigating the Hong Kong drug trade, Brian's fellow officer Lei Wulong discovered that he had deep connections with the drug dealers and attempted to arrest him. Upon doing this, a fierce shootout occurred and Brian was killed in the crossfire. After his death, Brian's body was sent to a laboratory belonging to Dr. Abel, a mad scientist that is willing to do anything if it means he can succeed over his rival Dr. Boskonovich. Using cybernetic enhancements, Dr. Abel brings Brian back to life, making him stronger than ever before in the process. In order to perfect him as a prototype for a cyborg army, Dr. Abel sends Brian into the King of Iron Fist Tournament 3 in order to steal data from Dr. Boskonovich, telling him to target his fellow competitor Yoshimitsu, a known ally of Boskonovich. Born as a training dummy carved from a 2,000-year-old white oak tree, Mokujin was one day deemed a relic from the past and was displayed in a museum where it sat for many years. However, upon the awakening of Ogre, Mokujin comes to life thanks to the spirits of the white oak tree sensing that the evil presence of Ogre, if left unchecked, will destroy the world. After breaking free from the museum it was stored in, Mokujin enters the King of Iron Fist Tournament 3 in order to aid the forces of good in their battle against Ogre's evil might, planning to use its divine powers to save the world from destruction. Upon hearing of the King of Iron Fist Tournament 3, Ling Xiaoyu once again asks Heihachi to build her an amusement park. Heihachi, still amused by Xiaoyu's demands, tells her that if she wins the tournament, he will build her the amusement park of her dreams. Xiaoyu, overjoyed at the idea of finally getting her theme park, leaves school with her bodyguard Panda and enters the competition. After his draw against Jin Kazama, Hwoarang is sickened at the idea of having to tell his master Baekdu-san that his perfect win streak is over. Upon returning to his dojo, however, Hwoarang is horrified to learn that Baek was attacked by Ogre in his absence and has gone missing. Fearing that his master has been killed, Hwoarang finds a new purpose in his life and abandons his gang to enter the King of Iron Fist Tournament 3 in order to defeat Jin Kazama and kill Ogre, vowing to not return until he has fulfilled both goals. With all the competitors finally gathered, the King of Iron Fist Tournament 3 officially begins. Having spent the last 19 years using his rage and embarrassment to push himself further in his training, Paul Phoenix proves to be a dominant force in the tournament, easily defeating any who are pitted against him. Similar to the last tournament, Paul is stopped by Kuma 2, who demands to battle the scarlet-clad fighter. Paul accepts Kuma 2's challenge and easily defeats him, to the shock of Kuma 2, who returns home in shame. With no one left in his way, Paul advances in the tournament and is told to travel to a pyramid in Mexico. Upon arriving with Heihachi, Jin and the Tekken force, Paul faces Heihachi in battle and is once again able to defeat the elder Mishima. Feeling confident in his fighting prowess, Paul soon finds himself faced by none other than the ancient fighting god itself, Ogre. With Heihachi's plan of luring it out having been successful, Paul and Ogre clash and, amazingly, Paul is able to defeat Ogre. Thinking himself to be the winner of the third King of Iron Fist tournament, Paul leaves the temple and returns home, overjoyed at finally cementing himself as the best of all time. Unbeknownst to Paul, however, is that Ogre is not truly defeated, as it rises to its feet and picks up Heihachi to absorb his fighting force. Ogre then proceeds to morph into its true form as more of the Tekken force begin to arrive. Now true Ogre uses its power to obliterate the Tekken force helicopters, showcasing its true and terrifying might. With no one left to face true Ogre, Jin Kazama steps up to confront it in the true finals of the King of Iron Fist Tournament 3. Now facing Jun's killer, something within Jin snaps as he battles true Ogre and destroys it, killing the fighting god and avenging the loss of his mother. Upon true Ogre's death, its body melts as the absorbed powers of the fighters it defeated shoot out to return to their original bodies. The Tekken force suddenly turn their guns on Jin and shoot him down. As a dying Jin reaches out to his grandfather, Heihachi reveals his true intentions and shoots Jin in the head. Heihachi goes to collect Ogre while the Tekken force investigate Jin's body. However, the Tekken force is suddenly thrown away from Jin's body as Heihachi realizes that Jin is a holder of the Devil Gene. Devil Jin leaps at Heihachi and slams him through the wall of the pyramid. As Heihachi plummets to the ground, Devil Jin grows black angel wings and flees into the night, leaving Heihachi to lament his new demonic foe. After True Ogre's death and Devil Jin's attack on the Tekken force, Julia Chang uses the commotion to sneak into the pyramid in order to find her mother Michelle. As Julia calls out for her, Michelle appears, having managed to escape from the Tekken force, but she collapses from exhaustion. Julia rushes to her side as Michelle reveals that she has taken the pendant back from Heihachi so that Ogre can never be controlled again. Julia vows to make sure Heihachi pays for his crimes, but Michelle tells her to not use hatred as an answer and instead use her fighting skills to protect the Earth. Michelle then tells Julia that it's time to return home to Arizona, where the two hope to live in peace. Paul Phoenix, who still considers himself the winner of the tournament, and Forest Law return to Marshall's dojo, where an angry Marshall waits for them, having discovered their participation in the tournament. The three start training in Marshall's dojo as they attempt to perform one of Marshall's signature moves. Forrest is able to execute the move flawlessly, but Marshall and Paul both fail spectacularly due to their older age, to the humour of Forrest. Yoshimitsu returns to Dr. Bosconovich with a jar of Ogre's blood, having been able to steal some from True Ogre's body without the Mishima Zaibatsu knowing. Bosconovich and Yoshimitsu watch over a lab rat that drinks from a sample of Ogre's blood, but Yoshimitsu is forced to flee with Bosconovich after the lab rat grows immensely in size and bursts out of Bosconovich's house. Having been unsuccessful in winning the tournament, Ling Xiaoyu and her pet panda go back to their normal lives. As the two leave the Mishima Polytechnical School, Kuma 2 presents flowers to Panda in an act of professing his love, but neither Panda nor Xiaoyu notice him and go home as the stunned Kuma 2 remains frozen in place. Despite being unable to defeat Ogre himself, King Jr. and Armor King return to the pro wrestling circuit, where Armor King oversees one of King Jr.'s matches. After getting the nod from his mentor, King Jr. finishes the match in a decisive manner. As he celebrates his win, King Jr. tries to look for Armor King but is unable to see him. Concerned for his mentor, King Jr. drops his title belt in the ring and rushes to the locker room, where he sees a despondent Armor King sitting with his mask off as he laments his grim medical prognosis. After entering the tournament in the hopes of preventing her sister Nina from returning to the life of an assassin, Anna Williams is successful in stopping Nina and takes her to a Mishima research lab in order to get their help in restoring her memories. However, the Zaibatsu are unable to restore Nina's memories, to the heartbreak of Anna. Despite her disappointment in being unable to continue their feud, Anna tries to build a normal life with Nina and takes her to the cemetery where their father Richard is buried. As the two lay flowers on the grave, Nina gets a sudden flashback of her rivalry with Anna 19 years ago. Despite Anna's attempts to help an overwhelmed Nina, she receives a sharp slap to the face from her sister, who shouts at her before leaving the cemetery. Anna smiles, however, pleased that Nina is slowly regaining her memories. With the Zaibatsu having been focused on capturing Ogre, Jane manages to sneak into the Mishima factory where Gunjack is being stored. After hooking up Gunjack to a computer, Jane inserts Jack 2's AI into Gunjack, bringing her old friend back to life. Jane is overjoyed at having Jack 2 back in Gunjack's body and rides on his shoulder into the wilderness. As they go to celebrate being reunited, Dr. Abel once again tries to destroy Gunjack via satellite, but Gunjack's improvements allow him to protect both itself and Jane from harm. Having been unable to defeat Yoshimitsu in the tournament, Brian Fury proceeds to go on the run as a means of fully testing out his new cybernetic enhancements. After being confronted by the Tekken Force, Brian proceeds to destroy the unit whose bullets do no damage to the cyborg. After destroying a tank by ripping off its barrel, a manic Brian laughs at his new level of strength. After being eliminated from the tournament, Eddie Gordo waits anxiously in his room for a drug lord who has info on his father's killer. An hour later, Eddie breaks into the drug lord's mansion and beats up his guards and the drug lord himself. After interrogating him, the drug lord points Eddie to a table at the back of a room which contains photos of the man who had ordered his father's death. After looking at the photos, a shocked Eddie sits at the table as he struggles to accept the fact that his father's killer was none other than Kazuya Mishima. A despondent Hwoarang sits by a dock as he laments his failure to face Jin Kazama in the tournament and avenge his master Baek by killing Ogre. Hwoarang is soon interrupted by a wounded Jin, who hides in a warehouse due to him still being hunted down by the Tekken Force. As a distraction, Hwoarang throws a trophy into the warehouse before attacking the Tekken Force from behind. As he defeats them all, Jin uses his devil powers to escape the warehouse, before Hwoarang has a chance to fight him. Hwoarang then stares at his hands and smiles to himself, feeling excitement at the idea of fighting Jin again in the next King of Iron Fist tournament. Heihachi, meanwhile, returns to the Zaibatsu headquarters and begins his search of Jin, not wanting another member of his family capable of using the Devil Gene to oppose him. Still desiring true power and immortality, Heihachi begins his research on True Ogre's body, hoping to use it to aid in the defeat of his grandson. Unbeknownst to Heihachi, however, a nightmare from his past will soon return from the grave to gain his revenge on the man who took everything from him.
We await your return, warrior.